Welcome back. You're still watching The Morning Breeze on NBS Television. My name is Simon Kagwanjala, and this is our edition of the topical discussion on Monday. And, well, my guests in the studio will be throwing a spotlight on some of the issues that shape the discussion around the state of affairs. And I'm joined by Lord Mayor Erias Lukwago, alongside Patrick Katabaazi Kiconco, a lawyer and a member of civil society. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me.
The pleasure.
Good morning.
Thank you. Morning.
Well, I'll begin with a letter, a directive that was issued by President Musevenis on authorities and agencies. He came out and expressed his dismay at the way these agencies are really draining national resources and the way things are working out in these agencies. I thought that would be a big story for us to start with and hear your digest. I'll begin with you, Patrick.
Yes, good morning, viewers. It is very important to understand that these statutory bodies are created by Acts of Parliament. These Acts of Parliament are assented to by His Excellency the President. These Acts of Parliament, before they are passed, they are discussed comprehensively by Cabinet. So there's nothing new in respect to understanding the magnitude of the problem. But maybe what I consider to be an emerging issue is that we are seeing the economy not growing at the pace it should grow. And therefore, if the GDP, of course, remains stagnant for some time, and yet we know that revenue generation is tagged to how the economy is progressing, so if the GDP is not growing, it means that we are not collecting enough money, and as such, we don't have adequate resources to run a government. Maybe that's when some of them start waking up to realize that, hey, we have so many cost centers that are coming up. And one of the areas where we are having a lot of expenditure is in statutory corporation and enterprises. I want to give you an example. You have the road fund that is in the road transport and works. You have the road fund. You have UNURA. So you have a road fund primarily managing money that is supposed to go to that fund. Then when it collects money, of course it sends some to some districts, but largely the money that is used by UNURA is largely collected from what goes to the road fund. So I mean, for me, that's an area of duplication of services. Now, another example that I would give you.
Maybe if I could interrupt you here, do we have any case to upload the president for waking up to this reality?
Yes, I mean, like I've already said, this is something that even civil society had complained of a long time ago. And specifically, one of the key things that civil society has been very prominent on is, for instance, in agricultural sector. You have an example like NADS. NADS, they say, has been restructured. And when you look at its operation, it's more or less like a procurement unit, which same responsibility can be done by the Minister of Agriculture. So for me, I think government needs to be applauded for this particular intervention. We hope it only succeeds, but we need to appreciate that they're already too late, in my view. When you look at the monies that are in these statutory bodies, the salary structure, way beyond even what the mother ministry actually gets.
Lord Mayor, what are the undercurrents in the president's letter? First, the tone. The president says he got this information that had been a dossier that had been sent to the prime minister, but the NRM supporters leaked it to him. And the tone from the president alone would suggest that perhaps the president is really concerned.
Well, that would be your own understanding of the statement. I mean, your interpretation of this particular statement. But personally, I take what comes from President Museveni as, I mean, I take it with a pinch of salt. I doubt that he did it with good intentions. Of course, there is politics behind all that. To me, he's trying to play to the gallery. He's trying to pull a political stunt. He's trying to...
Why would you call this political?
You see, now the debate is about lifting the age limits, about land bonanza in the country. It's all about the crisis we are facing, governance crisis in the country. Now, to me, it's a red herring of sorts. He wanted to divert public attention, because right now, if he had not written that letter, we would be talking about different things. We would be talking about other serious issues. Because for me, what would inform this, the decision for him to write that letter, it could be the outcry, public outcry, the concerns raised by, like he has said, the civil society, the donor community, and Ugandans at large about the huge cost of public administration. But is this the way to go? Is this how to handle it? The cost of public, is it only about statutory enterprise, statutory bodies? Or it cuts across? And if anything, actually, he should have started with his own cabinet, because the Constitution provides for a lean cabinet, just 21 ministers. How many do we have right now? What is the purpose of having that big army of advisors who never advise him? Over 200, the RDCs, there's so many public officers whom he has put in place, and there's so many districts we have, because ideally we should have less than 30 districts. By the time he came into power in 1986, I think we had only 26.
Can we look at this as one step at a time? The president has started with agencies and authorities.
But it's not going to be implemented. This way I have a problem. How many directives has he issued and they have remained on paper? They have not been translated into policy matters. How many? If I could cite quite a number of them. You have recently issued one on reduction of taxes on the informal businesses. Do you think it's going to be implemented? Nothing. He issued one about, things like people coming up with requests for districts. You remember he raised it. This, craze for districts, people coming up from small sub-counties saying we all want districts. But even right now, we're in by-elections of so many districts which have cropped up, which have mushroomed up, under his own supervision, leadership. And again, this particular decision, I'm telling you, it's not, this directive, it cannot, in my own opinion, it cannot be implemented.
Okay.
Because it has...
Wouldn't you support a reversal of the drain that we're experiencing today in the country?
I would rather support an overhaul of the entire state apparatus structure, not to handle it holistically, not to hoodwink us that actually now he is waking up to the reality that these statutory enterprise or statutory bodies are not that necessary, and issuing directives which may not be tenable. Because if he indeed meant it and he was serious about this and was really concerned, he would have called the cabinet and tabled the matter before cabinet. Why write a directive to the Prime Minister to do what? To just, because he has informed you, and I agree with him, these are a creation of the law. They are acts in place. Is that how you deal with matters? It's statutory bodies which are created under given legislations. So you would have brought this matter in a memo before cabinet, presided over cabinet, and they said, look here, gentlemen and ladies, we are here in the cabinet. How do we address the question of these, mushrooming statutory bodies? How do we handle this? Instead of just raising. So what do you expect? What action do you expect from the Prime Minister?
What I'm picking from you, and it's the question I would love to ask Patrick, has the president adopted a populist style where he's now playing to the gallery more than addressing the real issues?
Well, I wouldn't say so, particularly because this data was sent to the Prime Minister, and I haven't had a press conference where he has communicated to Ugandans directly. But the road mayor is raising a very, very important point that I had earlier on hinted on. that these are creations of the law. And for you to abolish a body that is created by law, you need to take particular steps. So now, the dilemma that we shall see in the implementation of some of these directives is how is the Prime Minister going to move? And when do we expect results for interventions such as these ones? So those are some of the things that actually at the end of the day, look at the aspect of goodwill in terms of the letter to the Prime Minister.
There's goodwill.
I mean, in my own view, in my own view, goodwill, but then looking at how a matter can be implemented, the obstacles that are at play, and the time limits that we have, pointing to something that is extremely difficult, in my view. So we are yet to see what interventions are going to be put
So
in place for
would,
this.
for now, would the president's letter pass for mere rhetoric? Because you seem to argue that it's hard to implement.
Yes, I mean, he's writing a letter directed to the Prime Minister, right? And we have picked it at that stage.
Lord Mayor, does this say anything about the president's style of work lately? The other day, he wrote a letter against charging informal businesses. Now he's writing against authorities.
Certainly, we have complained about the state of affairs in the country. We have sounded ourselves out hoarse and said, look here, we have a one-man's rule. It's a rule by decree. This is, actually, for all intents and purposes, this directive amounts to a decree. It has not been tabled before the right forum, ordinarily where the president would sit with colleagues in the cabinet and say, this is a matter, I have my own idea, because it's now an idea. It's his idea.
A letter written to the leader of government business.
Of course.
And that
What
is the Prime
it? Is
Minister.
it a policy statement? Is that how you initiate policies in the cabinet, in the government? So if it was a policy issue, the right channels would have taken, the right forum where you would have channeled it. But now he has his own grandiose ideas. It could be a good idea, a good proposal. But the methodology, the procedures he's using is wrong. The methodology is wrong. Because it tells volumes on how this government is now handling serious matters of government. Because if a sitting president would just get a paper and pen and write a directive to his prime minister.
Having been
issuing a
briefed
directive.
by NRM supporters.
Yeah, once you are briefed,
So he's a responsive president.
how do you respond? But that's how Amin used to do it. Because actually he wouldn't just wake up also with his own ideas. He would get views from people. They would come to him, they would approach him. Some would even accost him along the way and say, President, we want ABCD. This one has also said the same, that at times he gets waylaid by NRM enthusiasts. They ambush him and tell him we want this, then he issues a directive. So how is that different from the Amin era? How is it different? So this is ruled by decree, which is very, very unfortunate. It's unconstitutional. It could be, let me tell you, let me put a rider here. It could be well-intentioned. It could be actually a good idea. The proposal, the document itself might be bringing out a very important issue. Like in this particular case, we are all
Yeah, I
concerned
think
about
that's the real crux that we should be talking
we are
about.
all concerned about the proliferation of these enterprises. Even in KCCA, for example, I'm concerned. Why should we have two budgets for Kampala? Why? There is a budget for the minister. And these are the issues he's raising in his letter. He's saying, by the way, most of these matters which are vested in the authorities can be superintended over by the minister. We have several ministers, over 8 cabinet ministers. So in this case, we have Kampala. You have a minister, a substantive cabinet minister, and a state minister. Their budget is, for the financial year 2017-2018, is 7.9 billion. It has no accounting officer, as we talk right now. And it is actually understaffed, about 5 people within that ministry.
5 people taking 7.9 billion.
7.9 billion. You have a state minister. I can count them. You have the minister, you have the state minister, you have the assistant to the minister, you have the so-called acting undersecretary, and then the secretary. That is all. And these people are not even within the structure of KCCA. It's a totally different structure, staff structure there. It's a different entity, detached completely from the KCCA frame, system. Now you have our own budget. Yes, much as it was slashed from 562 billion to 337, now I hear it is 308 because it keeps on changing. I don't know why. So you can see the kind of situation we are talking about. The minister has got no strategic plan, because the plans we are implementing are KCCA plans. And National Planning Authority is mandated to come up, to liaise with the KCCA, to come up with the structural plans for KCCA. And also we are supposed to have a Metropolitan Physical Planning Authority. You can imagine that kind of situation. You have National Planning Authority in the Act. It's supposed to work hand in hand with the KCCA to plan for Kampala. Then you create a ministry for Kampala. You also have what they call the national, the Metropolitan Physical Planning Authority, an authority within an authority. KCCA, Kampala Capital City Authority, it's an authority in itself, but the very act, Kampala Capital City Act, which creates Kampala Capital City Authority, also provides for the creation of another authority called the Metropolitan Physical Planning Authority. This time around now to handle issues of planning with the metropolitan area, metropolitan Kampala. And now the minister is the one given the mandate to appoint that authority. Now you can see that kind of confusion. He's the very person who created this confusion. And they are compounding it up further. Because now they have brought in a new, you can imagine. You know, I don't know whether they have even policy guidelines. A clear framework that guides their policy direction. Because there is a bill now before Parliament to further strengthen the ministry as against these two authorities, that the minister should be now the political head, and now the minister should not be a minister for Kampala alone, but also for the metropolitan area, never for Wachiso, Mpigi, and the Mokono. But those other districts are under different entities altogether. There are district, there are municipalities, and there are also authorities there. So you can imagine that kind of situation. We are dealing with a complex issue which should not be trivialized by the president by simply writing a letter to the prime minister that by a stroke of a pen, write off these authorities. That's not how to handle it. This is a very complex issue which you must tackle as a nation.
Patrick, to what extent is the country stuck with these authorities? You said they are consuming quite a lot, a huge portion of the national budget. To what extent are we stuck?
Now we see, using the example of the road mayor, they are constraining service delivery because of competition. Because you have authorities, ministries, and other agencies competing for the same work, duplication of services. Meaning that you're paying like 4 times in examples of certain sectors for the same service. Secondly, these authorities and boards, in the law that creates them, gives them some autonomous independence, some kind of independence to determine their emoluments, to determine their pay, and to determine how things are done. So what happens, you have an example of UNRWA, where officers get so much money, and yet the mother ministries, the salaries for the mother ministries are so small. I don't know, and of course that would be the case probably with KCC as well, where people get a lot of money. So it creates, other than the other competition, in terms of mandates, you also get competition in terms of who gets what, thereby also demoralizing other people who are supposed to even be playing a superintendent role.
Yeah, but when the president was writing this letter, he said the high pay for URA was justified because they were doing a unique job.
So now, that is why we are saying, we thank the NRM supporters for informing the president. But in addition to what they told him, he needs to know that by taking that direction, it is simply prescribing Panadol for malaria. And why do I say that? The Lord Mayor has already told you the kind of complexities that are involved in this matter. So if we do not have a holistic approach that is looking at restructuring the entire service, we shall keep in problems. We shall solve problem A, creating a problem B. So in addition to what NRM supporters told the president, we can now add on to say, deal with statutory bodies, but in the context of public service restructuring, so that we identify all areas of wastage. In terms of administrative structure, we deal with them. In terms of resource utilization, you remember we had a discussion here about vehicles, as an example, and how Parliament at some point, they had moved the motion to dispose of all government vehicles and remain with a few in the pool that can be used by everyone. Person-holder vehicles to be abolished. Cabinet, last Friday, you had the idea about the travel abroad. So all those ones can be dealt with at once. And we know during this phase, this is a restructuring phase for the entire government service delivery system. And once that one is concluded, we know that we are moving in a positive direction.
Do you see any goodwill on the part of government to embark on this ambitious project to cut down on expenditure?
Yes, no action has been taken, so to that very end I can't speculate.
Lord Mayor, before we take a very quick break, do you feel the kind of relief the country would enjoy if indeed the president walked the talk on these agencies and authorities?
Well, certainly it would be a great relief to many of us. Actually, myself as the political head of Kampala, I head an institution, for your information. I head an authority, KCCA. And there is already a problem with that. One would ask who is heading KCCA, and that has been a subject.
Well, that's a dispute that will loom forever.
So for example, if we remove the KCCA, if it's one of the authorities to be removed, it would have helped us solve that problem in the first place. That jinx, that who leads the KCCA, that controversy. Is it Muchala Musisi? Is it Muchala Betty Kamya? Is it Lukwago? Is it the RCC? Who heads the KCCA? But away from that, and the most important thing I'll demonstrate you how problematic it is for us to deal with these authorities in Kampala. I've just given a few highlights, but let me dig deep into this. If, in terms of service delivery, for example, if you came to Kampala to, like you are an investor, and you want to deal, say for example, in biogas, we are the ones responsible for solid waste management, and you want to recycle our garbage, and one of the byproducts is to get electricity for us, which would go on the national grid. We don't have that mandate, yet we have the what? In other cities, generation of biogas is the mandate of the city authority. But now, we'll just refer you to ERA, Electricity Regulatory Authority. We have no business with that. If it's about management of wetlands, we have so many wetlands here. We don't want dumping, we don't want this. We just have to go to NEMA. That's not our work. Time and again I've been called by the residents in Kampala. We have an overflowing sewage here. It's not the mandate of KCCA to deal with sewage. National Water and Sewage Corporation. That's another authority. Then you come to for example, modernization of provision of housing facilities. We have a promise, personally I made a promise to come up with a low-cost housing project in Kampala. That's again not the mandate of KCC. They will take you to National Housing and Construction Corporation. You'll go now, collection of taxes. You'll get surprised. We had the mandate to collect at least non-tax revenue, local revenue. But recently we are faced with the attachments, Ganashi orders from court because of a huge debt portfolio, over 40 billion we are told. It's now in the range of 40 billion. So every now and again there are Ganashi orders being issued by court. So the accounting officer, executive director informed the authority the other day as I was presiding over that. Now that function of collecting revenue in Kampala, all the taxes are now going to be collected by URA. So that what we spend comes from URA. All these dues we are talking about All these revenue property rates and what not, all that now is being corrected by URA. We are not responsible as KCCA. It's another
So
authority.
what is KCCA doing?
Now, let me come to the last one. There are so many. Of course, they are NIRA and what not. Now I'll come to the last one. These flyovers you hear they are talking about, which are going to be sponsored by JICA around the Chitugumo House. There is one around the Ginger Road Junction. And you've had that controversy around the Centenary Park about the construction of a flyover there. It's not the mandate of KCCA now. It is UNRA, Uganda Revenue
National Roads Authority.
Roads Authority. All these statutory bodies have got their own different budgets. And we do not even have capacity to do, not even political audit. We cannot audit them. We cannot account for their funds. You cannot explain. And it has created some kind of confusion that for them, they have no even forum where they sit to agree on how to move. They move in different directions. I've already talked about National Planning Authority. It's the one responsible for our planning. Then I've already mentioned the Metropolitan Physical Plan, which is yet to be put in place. There is already the planning board, because the entire nation is a planning area, one planning area. That body is also there, which is also charged with planning. It's created under the Physical Planning Authority.
So President Musevenis is coming out to check duplicity and plunder.
But he's creating more. Right now he's benchmarking oil exploration in Equatorial Guinea. He's with Ngwema. He's talking about oil. And what are they providing for? Oil authority. There is oil authority.
Petroleum authority. That one is already there.
That petroleum authority. So he's creating more. So he's deceiving. That's why I told you he is not honest. He's not genuine when he comes up with his statement that he wants to scale down on these authorities. No, he does not mean it. And we are all here. I pray that we live long to see what is going to happen. Nothing. Because no action is going to be taken by the Prime Minister. For heaven's sake, even the Prime Minister has no powers to amend the law. Now the Prime Minister will have again to bring it back to Cabinet, to move bills, to amend these acts, to remove, to deal with these authorities. And they already, they have got their own budgets, they have got their own stuff, you have to lay them off, you have to, the retrenchment exercise. You had how costly it was to retrench civil servants. In the KCCA, we're still facing it. Those who were laid off in the defunct KCCA are still claiming, actually, we have a huge debt portfolio along the, in line with those people who were retrenched. So, let nobody deceive you.
Okay, the Lord Mayor is calling it political mockery. Patrick seems to say, well, if it's done, it will be a huge relief to the masses. But we're going to take a quick break, and when we return, we'll again be looking at the recent appointment of Justice Owinyi Dolo as the Deputy Chief Justice. That combined with the outgoing Justice Katabaazi's legacy after the break. Welcome back. You're still watching The Morning Breeze, and in the topical discussion, we're making sense of some of the big issues that are shaping the political discussion. Well, before we took a break, I just wanted you to give us the final highlight on why you seem to be desperate to see KCCA gone.
Sure, honestly, because an
authority
has got some unique attributes, a character. Because all these authorities I've mentioned here, actually I've left out others like Uganda WEC, Uganda Forestry Authority.
WEC doesn't stretch to you, does it?
It does, because if you are dealing with recreational facilities, wildlife centers and whatnot, it applies here. Because who tells you that wildlife authority should operate from Entebbe only? It's a national authority. You mean in Kampala we shouldn't have recreation and educational facilities like that? Is
Kampala Capital City Authority a redundant body?
Exactly. This is where I was driving towards. Because it is, I said it has a unique character. It has got a territory, unlike these other authorities. These other authorities have no territorial boundaries. It's only KCCA which has got a territorial boundary. To say for it, it is like an authority which takes charge, coordinates activities of other authorities in Kampala. Actually, that is its work now, to coordinate activities, coordinate with the NEMA, UNRA, URA, and whatnot. And that is the prerogative or function of governance. And that's where we are saying, we are insisting, that's the reason we are saying, scrap KCCA, do away with the KCCA as an authority. It should be abolished. We revert back to the old system because this is an administrative unit. Kampala is an administrative unit. All that is being done now is to hijack the governance function from the elected leadership. And that's why you see these clashes we have. The minister, the executive director, the RCC, the Lord Mayor, we are all fighting.
You want to suggest that the spirit behind the establishment of these authorities is sinister, not basically to enhance service delivery?
Definitely, the reason why they were created has not been justified. There is no justification that has been given by President Museveni, because he had to do away with statutory enterprises and said the government does not do business. You are having ministries which are supposed to handle public service. So what is the reason you are creating these statutory enterprises, these entities, apart from creating jobs? And many of these enterprises, by the way, for example, I'll give you an example for the Petroleum Authority. Do you know there are cadres who are already under training and they were waiting for them to complete education? There are those, I know some who have gone for masters specifically to study petroleum law. And many of them have been political actors. Some of them actually have been there harassing us and doing this. Now, when there is this window, there is this opportunity opening up, they say, oh, now let me go and do masters in petroleum law, specifically to come and take charge of the Petroleum Authority.
So are these agencies established to reward President Museveni's cohorts?
Not
Do you
necessarily.
share the feeling?
I don't share the same feeling. But of course now, once they are created, they create an opportunity for people to be deployed. And once an opportunity comes, of course, people who are closer to the table are the ones who get the opportunity.
Naturally.
Naturally.
So there's no cause, you would simply be envious of the people who are employed there.
These authorities and boards are created by Parliament. Lord Mayor was a member of Parliament, he knows that best. But of course, once they are created,
so we would have to blame Parliament, not President Museveni, who's come out
you blame
to
cabinet,
raise an alarm.
you blame cabinet, you blame the president, you blame Parliament. So what needs to be done is a holistic approach to restructure public service so that we maintain those that add value.
Let's get on another issue. Just last week again, President Museveni, using the powers that are using his mandate, the powers vested in him, he appointed Owinyi Dolo as the DCJ to replace Justice Kavuma, whose tenure ends this week. Let's talk about this, plus, of course, looking at the legacy of Justice Kavuma, who some say has a tainted legacy, others say he's done a fantastic job.
Well, it's not my habit to discuss people who are not there to perhaps defend themselves. But all I can say about
But if they are public officers?
if I can say about the appointment of the new Deputy Chief Justice, I think we welcome the new appointment and we wish him the very best. About the legacy of Honorable Justice Kavuma, we have had many people who have interfaced with him. The Lord Mayor will definitely give us exactly how his interface with him was like. But senior lawyers in the profession and many other people of high standing have come out to actually point out a very, very good fact that he didn't do his job quite well. You have justices of Court of Appeal sitting and making a ruling which in our view we interpreted to be directed against the president of the same court. So in my view, I don't think from what we have heard in the public domain and from what we gather from the lawyers who have appeared that he did a very good job. You have a scenario that has been created under his leadership of these interim orders within the constitutional petitions. You remember the case of Kihura, of the IGP, how an order, somebody throws in a constitutional application, no matter how it is drafted, an injunction ensues, and all of a sudden everything that is at standstill. I have another case that I was highly associated with Humphrey Tumwesije versus Honorable Alex Onzima and others. Here, this young man was challenging the constitutionality of appointing independent members of parliament as cabinet ministers without them resigning. That case has never seen the light of the day. And there are so many cases in the Constitutional Court presided over by him that have never seen the light of the day. And for me, this worries me because now the new Deputy Chief Justice has a very, very, very big, I mean, he will find so many cases that have never been cause listed. He will find so many things to troubleshoot. And we hope that he will be up to the task.
Wouldn't you be expecting too much from Justice Owiny Dolo to turn the tables around?
Yes, at least he has a starting point. He has the goodwill, in my view, from the people that I have talked to. They expect him to perform much better. The problems at that office are widely known. It is a public secret, if you ask me. So he has to start working on them, and we hope within the period of 5 years, we should be able to come here and say, okay, this is the case backlog that we found at the Constitutional Court. This is the case backlog that we found at Court of Appeal. And so far, this is how he has conducted business. Personally, I would very much want to see these interim injunctions at the Constitutional Court. Those corrective injunctions stop. That is my personal wish.
Okay, Lord Mayor, let's talk about Owiny Dolo's appointment. What awaits him, the hurdles, and of course, the blessings. Plus, of course, Justice Kavuma's legacy. I know you have something to say about him.
Well, before I talk about Justice Kavuma's legacy, I will say one thing about the appointment of Justice Owiny Dolo. I don't envy him at all. I don't envy him at all. Not because he doesn't measure up to the requirements of the office. He's one person I hold in high esteem. I have high regard for Justice Owiny Dolo. But the challenges he's going to encounter are quite enormous. They are insurmountable, so to say, unless a miracle happens or Ugandans take serious steps to address the political malaise we are facing as a nation. I don't think he will live up to the expectations of that particular office. And
So the excitement over his appointment is unwarranted?
Given the challenges we have, yes. One, that Constitutional Court is facing a crisis of confidence. It has never lived up to its billing.
And he's
By the
come
way,
to
it's
salvage
one
it.
single most important judicial, body you can find in the Constitution. Why? In our courts of judicature. Why? The Constitution, we say it's the fundamental of the land. It is the foundation of the state, foundation of the state structure. Everything hinges on the Constitution. So, for a court of that importance to be, right now in a state where it is right now, it's a crisis. It's a crisis. Mr. Kavuma, with all due respect, has run it down completely.
Justice Kavuma.
Well, Justice...
Will you have the courtesy to call him Justice Kavuma?
Yes, for the decorum of this show, respect for the decorum of this show and this TV.
For the show?
For the show. I will call him that. I will address him as...
Sorry? You'll do it for the show?
For this particular show.
So how do you regard Kavuma?
He's a person who entered the judiciary by accident, with all due respect. It was an accident that has happened to the judiciary in the recent times. Mr. Kavuma, or Justice Kavuma for purposes of this show, he's an accident that has happened to this country, to the judiciary. He is one person who has consistently passed obnoxious judgments, judgments which would be treated as trash by even an average Ugandan.
You're very harsh.
I'm not being harsh. I'm telling you, I'm giving you the position, the true position, as I see it, personal, in my own assessment. If you were to take my judgment as a representation of views of the majority, I'm telling you, that's how he's perceived, and that is going to be his record. So he'll go down the annals of history as an accident that happened to the judiciary, to the judicial system of this country.
So the president was very witted in coming out to address the accident, to correct what could have gone wrong.
And this is where I have my own, I said, pessimism. I have that disillusionment that things may not change for the better. Why? I've told you there is a crisis of confidence. The Constitutional Court is supposed to protect the Constitution, but it has participated and acquiesced and also abetted. It has actually abetted the violation of the Constitution, which is very, very unfortunate. It's an absurdity, actually. And that is the tragedy we are now have to deal with as a nation. That a judicial body, a court of judicature, like this, the Constitutional Court, which is supposed to act as a vanguard, as a protector of the Constitution, participating in its violation, in its abrogation. That is something we must tackle as a nation. Two, we have a regime which has no respect for rule of law, which has no respect for the doctrine of separation of powers, which treats the judiciary as a small department under the executive arm of government.
Lord Mayor, do you suspect that Kavma's tainted legacy, as you'd love to call it, is likely to infect Owinyidoro?
It will be a huge task on the part of the Honorable Justice Owinyidoro to reverse the kind of trend the Constitutional Court has taken under the current regime. Because you have also to look at that environment under which it's going to operate. Will he resist the overbearing character of Mr. Yoweri Museveni, who does not respect the independence of the judiciary? Because he believes where there is a stalemate, for example, and the matters are before court, you sort them out by giving a call to either the Chief Justice or the Deputy Chief Justice. And in this particular case, political contests now are being sorted out in the Constitutional Court. Most of these political controversies are ending up in the Constitutional Court. And what remains to be seen is how he's going to respond to those challenges, where he's faced with serious matters. They are before him as the head of that court, and there is a call from Mr. Museveni that, look, sort out that issue. There is a directive, because he rules by directives. There is a directive that handles this matter in the best interest of the
nation,
the state, of NRM, for example.
Patrick, here are two men of impeccable records. The Chief Justice, he's held in high esteem, and his deputy, held in high esteem. Can we say now that the judiciary is getting firmer by the day?
Yes, one would say so. But it's also very important to distinguish the two offices. The Chief Justice is at the level of the Supreme Court. The deputy is the head of the Court of Appeal. Maybe what we also need to discuss going forward is the dual role that is played by the Court of Appeal and whether it actually has implications. Because you have a Constitutional Court of first instance, which is in the Court of Appeal, the same Court of Appeal, which is handled by Justice of Court of Appeal, who also handle other ordinary cases in the Court of Appeal. So maybe that would be another area of constitutional reform. But going back to your question, where you have a Chief Justice who is held in high esteem by many, like you said, and one that has actually been ridiculed, if I'm to use the example of the road mayor, by colleagues and some members of the profession, you would expect that if the new if the new Deputy Chief Justice lives up to the billing, then certainly we shall have a better court. But you also recognize that the Constitutional Court, by its nature, really addresses most of the political questions. Because the issue of governance and constitutionalism, really, in my view, 80% of it is political. So, but now, if you have a syndrome that we have known in the legal circles as cadre judges, cadre legal professionalism, if you do not have a very strong judge, a person with impeccable integrity, then you will have issues. And it will be up to the new Deputy Chief Justice to ensure that he becomes independent, to ensure that he delivers justice the way it is supposed to be done. And if he actually does so, then if you merge that reputation that will be under at that level with the reputation at the Supreme Court, then I'm very sure we are going to have better judiciary.
Is there one thing you'll never forget about Justice Kavuma? And could this be underscoring his legacy? And is it likely to endure forever?
The day that will live in infamy in the history of Justice Kavuma, as far as I'm concerned, of course there are a number of other cases he has bungled up, but in my particular case, it was the 1st April of 2014 when he sat in his boardroom and by stroke of a pen rendered the judgment of Justice Lydia Mugambe negatory by simply saying Lukwago should vacate office without giving me a right to be heard, and my lawyers kept on knocking at the door. He had locked himself in together with the state attorneys, Honorable Katuntu, Walubiri, Medad, and others were all there to represent me. But they were locked out, and he issued an order. And it was an injunction against an injunction, because Justice Lydia Mugambe had issued an injunction stopping Mr. Frank Tumebas and his colleagues from evicting me from State Hall. It was an injunctive order given. Then he also issued an injunction against an injunction. Injuncting an order of injunction. To date, I'm still suffering the injustice meted out by Justice Kavuma up to now. Even when I push for my rights, legitimate rights, government will make reference to even the accounting officer, Madam Musisi.
So you're still haunted by the injunction?
The injunction. And when I mention it, they say, Lukwago with his demands for his salarias. But I won a case before Justice Lydia Mugambe. And it is a known principle of law. Thou shalt not suffer a wrong without a remedy. And you have to enjoy the fruits of litigation. So I litigated successfully. I got a judgment in my favor. I have not benefited from the fruits of litigation up to now.
How many Ugandans do you think are
the
suffering
government
from?
owes me salary areas of 562 million.
To date?
To date, it's not cleared. And Kavuma is retiring with a file where every time and again they make reference, go back to Kavuma. You go to Kavuma, the file is under lock and key. So what do you do under such circumstances?
Well, gentlemen, I'm afraid we've not had enough time to exhaust the issue of security and several other issues. Maybe you'll have a minute on security each.
Sure. It's terrible. What is happening in the country? You see, there is this talk that Tweba Kakuturo. But honestly speaking, Ugandans should wake up to this reality. We are sitting on a time bomb. What is happening in Entebbe right now? The kind of murders, heinous murders, gruesome murders, and the way the police are bungling up these war matters, the way they are not even explaining it to us, the real issues, why it is happening. And the way they are also, because if the press reports are anything to go by, that they are hiring services of prostitutes, chiefess and what not, if that's the kind of security you are talking about, then we're in trouble as a nation. And these murders which have happened in recent of the
does it start and stop with Kaihura?
He's, with all due respect, is preoccupied with regime protection rather than executing his mandate as provided in Article 212 of the Constitution.
Well, Patrick, in just a minute, what do you say about the state of security?
I mean, if somebody wakes up, goes to town, or go to do his or her own business and doesn't get home, that cannot be said. That is a very good picture of the security that we have. And
but we've had several assurances coming from
yes, those are assurances, but if assurances cannot translate into tangible results, then we can dismiss them. So for me, there is a very, very serious cause for concern. The nature in which police is delivering the service is not admirable. The way they are recruiting gangs within the police ranks, those are stories that have been heard or told over and over. And in my view, I'm glad that government is coming up, Electoral Commission is putting LCs in place. So there is have to be a deliberate policy to revert to the, you remember the old LC system, where you now merge these efforts to ensure that at the end of the day, people who come into our communities can be identified. You have cooperation between the LC system with the community and then police, so that we address some of these issues that affect somebody at the
Well, gentlemen, thank you very much for sparing time to speak to us, share your views on the current state of affairs in the country. That's all we had for you this morning. Coming up next will be the breakfast meeting. Good morning.